What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another roundtable. We have, of course, me, the content manager, Edward Vasquez. We have the global communications director, Will Kinsler, and of course, the creative director, Ash Habib. Now, the number one thing that we're going to touch on right now in this roundtable is you guys' reaction, the community's reaction to the latest update and a few more things in relations to what has been going on since our last roundtable. So the first thing we're going to touch on is what did we think of the overall response to the latest update? And I'm going to pass this one on to you, Will. What was the reception? What's the vibe that we're getting from these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think the comments that I saw a lot of that I like is it felt like a step forward, right? And I think last time we got here on the round table and talked about shipping an update that didn't go over well, right? So you kind of have those moments, sometimes when you're working on a game where you're like, okay, that one didn't land quite how we wanted to. And when that happens, it's important to sort of take stock and understand, hey, we want to make sure that the updates that we ship are valuable. And it can be a hard thing to determine exactly when an update will ship because we're always working on stuff. And at some point, you got that cutoff, which is like, well, if we cut it off today, here's what we get. If we cut it off, 5 days from now, here's what we get. And sometimes that can be a meaningful, difference. And so this time we really wanted to put out an update that felt meaningful in terms of the boxers that came out, which obviously we got some pretty big names in there. With the AI improvements, the changes to damage, which we talked about on here, feel like meaningful steps for us. We're still mid development. There's a lot to work on. We see a lot of that in the feedback. Sometimes when you ship an update, it's like the thing that becomes most front of mind all of a sudden changes. It's like, oh, this thing's better, and now, this other thing comes into view. And that's always interesting to read through some of that as well and see how that changes as we ship the updates. But yeah, I think we feel really good about it. It brought a lot of players back into the game to check that different stuff out. And so yeah, it's been good. We're a little over a week in, so I feel like the feedback is starting to settle some, and it's been really valuable to us.
Yeah, 100%. I'm seeing a lot of positive responses coming from this update, more than usual when it comes to our updates. But one really cool thing that a lot of people are actually, I don't know, there's a really positive vibe coming from it. I'm gonna pass this on to you, Ash. What has been the response? What has the response been regarding the fighters? And I'm sorry, the fighters in the new update. And what are we looking to adjust when it comes to those fighters as well? Because that's actually a thing that's also being been talked about.
So look, I think the fighters overall went down really well, based on the feedback and the comments I've been getting. Really great to see that. I'd like to think we've got a pretty good roster in our game, but that we're still able to drop names like Lomachenko and Amir Khan, Daniel Jacobs, and Floyd Patterson into the game. So I felt like it was a good mix. And with our game, with regards to fighters' styles, how they move, we also want to feel, that you're playing with somebody unique. And certainly speaking about Lomachenko, with his movement and his unique pivot punches that he's got in the game, I think that came across pretty well. But having said that, there will be some changes that we'll be looking to make with certain fighters, like maybe Amir Khan's a little bit too fast in our game. Do we need to do something with that? And also, I think, some of the things that, for example, Lomachenko highlighted is that, we kind of feel like the game is a little bit skewed towards, people who are really good at outside fighting, right? So being able to fight off your back foot and play at distance. Whereas for a fighter like Lomachenko, might be a little bit tricky in the way Undisputed plays right now. So, we are looking at ways to make some of those adjustments, and One of them is like, for the shorter guys in the game, or the guys that like to move on their front foot. We're looking at ways of being able to close the distance a lot faster at the moment, because again, I feel like the game, technically you can fight very well off the back foot, but going forward, other than going in a straight line, the game doesn't really give you a whole lot of options to do that. So, that is one of the things that we are working on right now in terms of being able to close the distance with the fighter. Whether that's a bit of head movement going in, that is something that we're actively looking at the moment.
Ash
Okay.
spoiling Ash spoiling the answer to the question that's like 3 questions ahead.
But
But
one thing.
it's I
Okay,
was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, and we mentioned Lomachenko's a southpaw. We're getting
Yeah,
some
that's what I was gonna
questions
say.
about southpaw specifically, and people saying that they feel a little slower. Is there something to that? Is there something going on with southpaws?
Yeah, so that's another area that we're looking into right now, and we've noticed that with Southpaw fighters, the game has literally hundreds of little individual mechanics, and I think for us, the whole Southpaw orthodox kind of changes that we're making in the game, right now they're not all consistent. So there are tasks that we're working on right now, literally on that topic, which will hopefully result in Southpaw fighters feeling a little quicker. So that is something that is completely resolvable internally.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ash. And Will, I'm going to pass this question on to you. What are the players saying about AI improvements, and what can we expect? And this is important because AI was a point of contention for some people, especially that were not in the online, not into that online experience, and wanted to do that individual gameplay. So what's the feedback that we're getting from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think arguably this is actually the most meaningful thing that we shipped in this update in terms of like a really big change. We spend a lot of time talking in that PvP online, world, and I think a lot of our audience in places like Discord is very much where a lot of the feedback is centered. But I mean, the truth is about half our audience is offline players that aren't really playing online a whole lot at all. And of course, everybody's waiting for a career mode, is kind of the big thing that you hang your hat on as an offline play mode. But in the meantime, what you do is you go into quick fight, and you hope to have interesting fights with the variety of fighters. And AI is really all about whether or not you get that result. So we have a newer person on the team that has really been focused on AI. I think some of you may have seen him in Discord, talking about the update. But yeah, it's a really big and meaningful step forward. It's just a first step, though. I think there's a lot of areas of, when it comes to AI and the different behaviors that you want to see. We're already seeing some of that feedback. Like, for example, there's certain fighters where players are still saying, hey, this fighter doesn't engage all that much, right? Like, I'm wanting to fight, but they're not throwing a whole lot over the course of the fight. So there's some of those things that we're looking at. We did drop, I mentioned Discord, we did start a AI specific feedback channel, which is great. I think you've seen us do more and more of that lately, where we're setting up specific spots to be able to give certain kinds of feedback, or be able to talk specifically around that stuff. And that's super helpful. So, I think the cool thing about AI, again, is it's a step forward, but it's there's a lot more work to do. And it's the sort of thing where we should be able to, every update, or close to, be able to see additional changes to the AI that will get it feeling even better as we go.
That's fantastic. And I love the AI improvements. It feels like you're fighting a more realistic, almost like you're fighting a person, the way the way it's situated now. So I'm loving the improvements myself as well when I'm playing single player. Now, Ash kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's dive a little bit deeper into this question. There's been conversations about the back foot fighting being more viable than front foot fighting. And one One in particular topic that a lot of people are touching on is the step back straight. And a lot of people feel that it's very spammable. It's very, you can use it and kind of abuse it. So we're seeing a lot of discussions on that. What does the dev team think about this?
So look, I think this topic has come up before in terms of certain elements in the game which don't feel right if you play a particular way, and this kind of also comes down to us playing the game as we would in terms of like boxers playing the game as a boxer, where you're not playing it to spam certain things or trying to look for exploits. And I think, one of the things that we're learning is that you can't build a game, just thinking about those aspects, right? You got to think about, how can the game be exploited? So, we're learning, these things all the time. And, the back foot straight is essentially, one of those areas that, okay, yeah, this punch can be spammed and maybe it's giving an unfair advantage. So, that is something that we're looking to address. And, the feedback around punches and the transitions, these are all things that we internally as a team are looking at. And, we're making those adjustments. So I think the back foot straight is one of those, punches at the moment that people can expect to change.
Yeah, and it's really just part two, right, of the story, right? Like a lot of times what we'll see is like players will zero in on like a specific thing and say this doesn't feel good, but like when it comes to the balance of uh being able to fight both on your front foot and back foot, like there's like all these different elements that make that up, right? Some of it has to do with with that specific punch. Some of it has to do with things like your ability to dodge on your or on your way in to not just get hit when you're coming in, and more options for that. And then some of it also has to do with things like stamina, right? Where if you got somebody like a Joe Frazier or Rocky Marciano, you're hoping like I can wear this opponent out and it'll pay off at the end of the fight. Even if they're able to get away for a little while, they're not going to get away forever. And while stamina impacts your punches, like right now we were just talking about before this, that it doesn't really, you can still move the way that you could, in round one. And so, I mean, I think, while we don't have like specific news to share about what we'll do about those things, I think it's important to acknowledge, like, yeah, we know that that doesn't work and that that's not right. And with a number of these things, like we're looking and seeing like how each of these individually fits into the overall to make sure that it's balanced. And we know that it's a back foot, heavy game right now. And I think it's going to take some time and a real concerted effort to add it because or to balance it, because it really is more than just one element. Like, and you'll probably see us, we might touch one of those, things in one update, and then another one might, take 2 updates or 3 updates or whatever it is, depending on how complex the piece of work is. But that's the goal, right? So, as we're making progress along that, we're hoping that everybody will tell us like, yeah, that made it better, or no, it didn't, or here are the things that I want to be able to do that I can't do, right? Because it's like you think about that as that person wanting to fight off the front foot and be aggressive. You think in terms of like, here's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to get my head under the jab. I want to be able to, stay on top of somebody, and I can't do that, right? And that gives us some things to look at to be able to decide, okay, what are our tools to be able to solve that problem?
Yeah. Awesome. Yes, there's always a delicate balance between aggressive fighting and defensive fighting, or fighting more conservatively. But definitely, I 100% agree. Those kind of things, giving them more options and making the stamina be more in line with what they're expecting if they're working towards that, and that allowing them to be more aggressive and be rewarded for that. I think that's a really good direction to head into. But another thing that was a surprise to a lot of the player base is the ratings changes that we did. So how do we feel about the response to the ratings changes from this latest update? And I'll pass this one on to you, Will.
Yeah, I think pretty good. We talked before in a previous roundtable about that. That is another one of the areas on Discord where we opened up a specific area to talk about it. And I think we've made ratings changes already over the course of early access prior to this last update, but this was the first one where, you know, we took a bunch of, we really focused on, you know, very specifically that channel and people wanting to engage us and talk about it. And I think there's a couple things to think about with ratings. Like one, you think about ratings in terms of we've got all these fighters in the game, and when we're rating a fighter, we want to make sure that they stand out in a way that you understand why you want to choose them. So like Ash and I were talking about this recently about, you know, with the new fighters that came in with his update about like, yeah, like everybody's got to have, you got to have something to hang your hat on. What's my reason for choosing this fighter? And so I think first, you know, we're really thinking about like the broad strokes of directionally, does this fighter fight the way that we want them to? And that's probably the first thing that we're focusing on. And then, you know, over time, because we're in early access, I think we get to more of those details of, you know, of what makes somebody really feel like a true representation of, of that fighter. And some of that has to do with, you know, the small details that matter. Some of it has to do with how the game's balanced at a certain time, right? Because sometimes the fighter might just not feel effective because some of the other things that we were just talking about with, you know, front foot, back foot, or things that are core mechanics of the game. So balancing while we're making these like big sweeping changes sometimes, and then trying to rate fighters on top of that is can be a little bit tricky, because there can be times where a fighter just feels better than another. I mean, like you could argue like, well, just make them the way they should be, you know, with the stats, and make it look right so that if I read it, it's palatable. But there's a little bit of risk in that, right? Because like we're in the end, what we really want is the fighter feels good, right? It's less about the number. We want the numbers to look and feel right, but it's less about that and more about like, does the fighter really feel the way I expect them to feel? You know, if I'm a fan of that fighter. And so, yeah, it feels like a good step for us toward making that more of a conversation with players. We definitely used and talked about a lot of the feedback that we got. And we focused a lot on the heavyweight division. That was where a lot of the feedback came. It was it's the most popular division in our game in terms of what people choose to play. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what's next. What do people, you know, feel like are the next fighters to focus on, and what do we need to do? And we'll keep that conversation going.
Awesome, awesome. Now, a topic that I want to jump into, which is a topic that's super dear to my heart, and I'm gonna pass this one on to you, Ash. We're touching on online issues, the progress on that. Where are we with like the online, the stuff that you know most of the people are talking about in terms of the things that, even the things that they like, but mainly the things that that's bothering them a little bit with online.
Yeah, so look, I mean, we know that there's still issues in the online space, and I think in the last roundtable, I talked about that we're bringing some external help in with regards to those online challenges. Now, I can give a little bit more information about what's taking place. So we have brought essentially experts in that are helping us to fix the online issues. Now these guys, they've helped ship AAA combat titles. So these guys, when we say experts in the online space, they literally are. So we're very hopeful based on the discussions we've had, and they've carried out the deep dive into the game, and we're now on track in terms of identifying those problem areas, and they're working away. So I think I'm very, very hopeful in terms of what I've seen so far. It's looking promising. So we understand as a studio that it's a real critical issue, because outside of career mode, if you want to play the game, you've got the certain offline modes with regards to playing with a friend, or the prize fights. But if you want to go online, you don't want to go online and come across a whole bunch of problems. So it is a top priority for us, and I feel like we're treating it as such by bringing in the experts to help us resolve some of these issues. So I'm not going to say, yep, next update goes out, we'll have all these issues fixed. But it is something that we're working on in terms of we've got to find a good solution, and we're on the right track.
All right, perfect. So you mentioned about updates, which is a good segue into this question, and I'll ask. I'll start it off with you, Will. What can players expect in terms of the frequency of updates? Because that's something that's always up in the air. They're always thinking, "Oh, is an update coming out today? Oh, I see this. Maybe this represents an update that's coming out." So, what can we tell them in terms of the frequency of updates and how that's going to roll out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question because of what you mentioned. Obviously, we have the hardcore that are, wanting to talk to us every day. As soon as we ship an update, it's all about when is the next one coming. And of course, when we have big pieces of work like the online stuff that Ash mentioned, it's like people we know that all that stuff can't come soon enough for people that are dedicated and have already put lots and lots of hours into the game. And so, I think I think a couple things. I think like one, when we ship the game, it's like into early access, uh there's a bunch of stuff that is like kind of quick and easy to fix in terms of identifying what needs to happen. And so, when you saw us, the first couple of weeks really just kind of like doing patch after patch after patch, that was relatively straightforward to do because a lot of those things were pretty simple, small pieces of work or just necessary things that had to happen right away. Where now we're into this stage where really the updates are typically going to take longer, and some of that has to do with just the amount of time it takes to work on a specific thing, and it's also about making sure that we ship something that's of value. So it's kind of like we were talking about at the beginning of this, like, hey, we shipped one in mid-March that didn't go that great, and that's because it really was more of a hot fix that we snuck a couple of gameplay elements into because we wanted to try to get something in there, and so we didn't set a great expectation for that. Whereas now this one that we've just shipped had a bunch of meaningful things into it. And actually, even during the course of process of this update, there was a question of, hey, can we take these AI changes on, or should we push them into the next update? And we held this update for I don't know, an extra week, 10 days, something like that, in order to get those changes in because we thought they would be meaningful enough. And I think looking back, we feel really good about that decision to make sure that we can catch enough value, attach enough value to a specific update, so that the updates feel like pretty beefy, and that if you've been playing, that you have a significant notice. And so sometimes what happens is like we do a lot of work and it just doesn't come into an update for a while, right? Like, so for example, we talked about in the last round table, yeah, we're working on the uppercut, blocking changes to make sure that body uppercuts, are a little bit more reasonable to deal with. And we've been working on that for a while, but some things, it's like something like that. It's like we get it in, but we have to make sure it works properly. We have to adequately test it. And so even though we were working on that, before this last update, it's just not ready to ship, right? Some things are gonna, I would call sprints, which is, basically how we organize the work that we do. But sometimes you get to the end of the sprint and the goal was not to finish and ship it. It was to get it to a certain point, and then we're going to pick up that work in the next sprint and get it over the finish line. And so you just have pieces of work that take multiple updates, right? We're working on things that you don't see yet, that will take a while, that won't ship. We talked about the online changes. We're working on things like career modes. Like, we're making progress on all of these things, and it's always a choice to decide when to ship something. And it can be a thing that moves around a lot. And so that's why, which also why we try to be really careful about how we talk about when we'll do a thing or whether or not we're going to do a thing, because a lot of times it's a good decision to make a change to that plan. And we're making a game where we've got, like, this is a bit of a long-winded answer, but like, we're making a game where we've got a couple of things to think about. We've got like our roadmap of stuff we've communicated. We're telling people, you get this, right? And people have bought into our game. They've paid to be in early access, and so we have to ship those things. And then we also have to think about, well, what's the unplanned work where we carve out time to be able to say, okay, here's some balanced stuff that we've got to do. And it's like, it's a little bit of like almost like playing Tetris or something with all the work that's on our roadmap, because stuff has to move around. If there's really, something feedback wise that has to be addressed now, it's going to move another thing. Or if there's a thing that has to wait a little while because we have these essential features that are going to shift, that's what happens. And so it's like, if it feels like we're not in a rush sometimes, it's definitely true, because we don't want to just spit stuff out as fast as we can. We want to make really good decisions, because we're not just thinking about, well, 3 weeks from now, is there going to be an update? We're thinking about, we're shipping a game, ultimately that's going to be done, right? Like, that's, or at least shippable, we'll call it the full release of the game. We'll keep adding to it after, but we're going to call it the full release of the game. And so we're thinking about that finish line and all the things that we have to do to get to the finish line. And so, yeah, it ends up being, where some of these things are going to take time. And I think, yeah, the frequency of updates might not always feel like it's a lot.
Gotcha. Thank you for that, Will. And pivoting a little bit away from the technical elements of the game, something that was kind of cool, kind of exciting, and I'll pass this one on to you, Ash. We've been at a couple conventions since our last roundtable. So how did those go, and what can you tell us about that experience that we had? I know I had a blast at PAX, but what can you tell us about the experience with the community doing these conventions?
Yeah, I mean that was amazing. Both GDC, PAX East, and then WASD as well in London. And I guess, not coming from the games industry, this was a first time experience for me. And yeah, it was truly amazing. I think seeing the response, I guess GDC being developer focused, but seeing the response from other developers, based on kind of what we're creating here was great to see. And I think just being out there at PAX East and WASDs, just seeing people, coming and enjoying the game. And a lot of the people had maybe never seen or heard of the game before, and stopped by the booth and picked up the controllers and seemed to have a blast. So I think I guess really from the very early days of wanting to make this a technical boxing game, and putting all the mechanics and all the elements, and almost 70 punches and all these kind of things that we've talked about in the game. And another critical point of that is it fun to play, right? So you've never played a boxing game before, and it's easy saying that, where you want it to be easy to pick up and play, but have a lot of depth to be able to master. And I think for me that was probably the first time I've truly seen that at first hand, where people are coming to play the game, of not particularly boxing fans, maybe not even particularly combat fans, but just pick up the game and just have an absolute blast. And then hearing that kind of feedback, it really kind of gave me a perspective on the game as well. To I guess my view of, we do want to make a fun game, but at the same time keep it at a very high technical level for players that want to go to that depth. So I think that was a really good experience to be able to see people play that, whether they were technical or not.
Yeah, no. How did you feel about that, Will, about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, so it was interesting. And so, I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, PAX, well, Ash did basically like a gauntlet. He went from
He went
GDC
everywhere.
in San Francisco to PAX, to then WASD the next week in London. And so he was just nonstop traveling. I only went to PAX, so I'll tell you what I thought about PAX. So PAX, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a 4-day convention, and so the show floor is open about 8 hours a day. And so we had a booth that I don't know, maybe Ed, we can throw up a photo of it over top of this when you do your edit. But we had a booth there inside of Play On, our publisher's booth, that allowed us to have a few stations. And then we had like one station on the end that was kind of like for media, where people would come in and organize, set up interviews to come in and ask us questions about the game. And so there's a little bit of like, when you go into that, there's a little bit of an unknown, like Ash said. So it's like, it's really our first shows that we've done. And we really have made a kind of a bet with this game that, like, we talk about that authentic, true to life boxing and stuff. We've made a bet with this game that we think that that is fun for a large number of people, not just the people that have been following this game for, for years, like like you and I, Ed.
Yeah.
But that we think it's fun. And so when you have that moment of watching people play for the first time that don't know anything about it, or I'm sitting there, we do these like half-hour media sessions where I'm explaining all these things. I got my list, like Ash said, 60 punches. I'm showing them first, because it's like there's a lot to think about. It's like, got to teach them how to protect themselves. I got to teach you can dodge, you can slip, directional punches, which people, I think our core players really value, but you got to tell everybody that they're there. If you're just the average person, they don't know that they're there, or why they should use them, or why they should care about them. And then what's cool is, like, when you're taking somebody through this, and especially in the longer sessions with media, where they start to pick it up and they get it, and they're like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can put this together. I can move myself in a position to be, hit and not be hit. I think that feels really good, right? It makes us feel like we're on the right track, and that our vision for, because, like, we just think boxing is cool. It's like the more that you learn about the sport, the more interesting it is. And our game has a lot of those elements. Still plenty to work on, I know, but it does have those elements. And so, like, yeah, I mean, I think it feels really good to see people who weren't asking for or expecting these things get, kind of also get it, and understand why it's cool or valuable. And the ultimate compliment is, like, when somebody comes back to the booth,
Yeah, that
2,
happen
3
a lot.
times on the weekend, they bring their friends, and it's just like fun watching people in person fight, where they're like trash talking each other and like all that kind of stuff. PAX,
Rematching.
Mickey Ward came by at PAX. We're in Boston, so Mickey Ward came by. I think it was actually the first time he'd seen the game, up close, and got an opportunity to check it out. Ash brought the WBC Undisputed belt, which is like probably one of the favorite things of people that stand in line for the game, is just to take pictures with the belt. So it's a lot of fun. It feels good to be at events and learn a little bit more about what the average person thinks of the game. And yeah, I mean, it's a step forward to, like, and we always talk about bring boxing back, bring it back to the gaming space. It feels like we're doing that. We got a game in early access. We're doing events. It's a work in progress. We have plenty to do, but it feels good to be just there, just doing it, right? These are the things, Ash, I mean, certainly for you, that you would say, I dreamed of this, right? Or maybe even I couldn't have dreamed of this, right? But, like, now we're just like, you and I talked about it. It's like we're doing those things. We're doing these things that we said that we would do. And so, yeah, I mean, I think for me it feels good. Except I got COVID afterwards, so that was rough.
Oh yeah, that was bad. Yeah, I had a blast at PAX, seeing people come back. I mean, people even challenging, us to play the game because they felt good about how they were doing against their friends. I think all of that stuff just it breeds that competitiveness.
They only did that to you, and they didn't do that to me.
Listen, you were dealing with media. I was dealing
Actually,
with the,
no,
with the...
actually, I have a couple of anecdotes that I think are funny from PAX that stick out. One is, like, I'm playing against Hip Hop Gamer, right? We're doing our interview, and I've known him for a really long time. I've known him for probably like 10 or 15 years or something. And so it was one of these things. He's already played the game. So, sometimes when you're playing against media and it's new, I don't just go in and knock people out. Like, I'm meant to be teaching about the game, and then I'm using some of the tools against me. With him, I was less worried about that. I was like, he's played the game before. I was like, I'm not going to go that easy on you. I know you know what you're doing. So I'm fighting him, but I gotta show. I'm winning my round. I'm winning all the rounds and stuff. He's like, you're beating me, and I'm explaining to him about all the mechanics still, and I'm talking to him about flash KOs. And I was like, wouldn't it be funny? He's looking at the predicted scorecard. He's like, you're winning. I was like, wouldn't it be funny if you knocked me out? Sure enough, a round later, he knocked me out. I'm there. He's got like a camera in my face. Oh, and I'm like, of course this would happen. And that actually happened to me twice while I was playing with the media, where I got flash KO'd in fights where I was winning. The other thing that happened, I have to pick on Ash because he asked me for a fight, and we fought. And this is what I always hear Ash talking about, headbutting people when he's like playing and we're in like meetings and stuff. This is what he did to me. Ash headbutted me to try to open up a cut. I feel like Ash knew right away he wasn't gonna outbox me. He's gonna resort to the tactic of headbutting me to see if he could open a cut, which he did. And then he was not focusing well enough to stop me. But
I was just
that's
showing the
kinda-
players. I was just showing the people around like the different things you can do in the game, right? I was just showing
You
people,
know,
look, this is how you open a cup.
He uses these tactics. Well, if it's any solace, I personally did not lose to anybody during PAX. I beat everyone,
No.
Ash, Todd, and
No, you
everybody that
played
came in
me.
there.
I think we hadn't played in
We
a
played,
while.
and I won even that
I
fight.
felt so rusty playing against you, and I was like, man, this isn't going at all how I want to. It's like I got my window right of I'm gonna be a pretty good player at this game
Yeah.
online, and I'm sure I'll do fine over the course of time. But yeah, I'm not gonna be one of the top players in this game. I don't think.
So with that, we'll go ahead and end this round table. Kind of fun there at the end. We talked about the convention, but the technical elements of the game is definitely something that we are 100% focused on, and we're going to continue to communicate with you guys. But we want you guys to continue to communicate with us. We want to keep getting your feedback. So one thing that I'm going to ask you guys, you could do it on the Discord down in the comment section below, anywhere, Twitter, socials. Let us know what would you like to see in the next round table. And with that, peace out. We love you. Bye from the Steel City Interactive team.